Hola, bienvenidos a todos nuevamente a nuestra Semana Internacional 2021, nuestra expedición nórdica. Gracias por estar del otro lado, gracias por seguir asistiendo a nuestros eventos. Ya se está acabando tristemente, pero estamos súper emocionados de todo lo que hemos podido aprender de los países nórdicos. Hoy nuestra invitada para esta charla es Pirita Nakkalajärvi. Ella es de Finlandia y estamos muy emocionados de que esté con nosotros. Su charla es en inglés, ella no habla español, así que le daré la presentación en inglés y ella continuará de esta manera. So, Pirita, welcome. Thank you for joining us. I just want to let everyone know a little bit more about you. So, Pirita is a Sami with a unique profile combining combining high-profile international business career and indigenous rights advocacy. Pirita is a strategy and mergers acquisition professional. She previously worked at Helen Ventures, PwC Strategy, Mezzo, Booz & Company, Nokia, and Merrill Lynch. Pirita is an elected member of the Sami Parliament in Finland. She's also a member of the Inari Municipal Council from Greens. In 2012 and 2017, Pirita ran the Sami language operations of the Finnish broadcasting company YE. Hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. Pirita holds a Master in Science in Economics from Helsinki School of Economics and a Master in Science in Media Communications with distinctions from the London School of Economics and Political Science. Pirita is a supernumerary PhD student at Sibelius Academy, focusing on Sami, yoic, and cultural appropriation. Pirita Nakkalajärvi, it's a pleasure to have you here with us. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for taking the time to share with us what it is to be a Sami, what it is to work in the industry, and the floor is yours. I'll just let you go ahead.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction, Estefania, and thank you for the invitation. What a surprise to get an invitation to speak to you. It's really an honor and a pleasure. And I bring greetings from Sápmi, that is Samiland, our area of the indigenous Sami people. Although, mind you, today I'm in Helsinki, but still up here in the north. So Helsinki is, of course, the capital of Finland, and we are now heading towards the winter. Here in Helsinki, it's been quite rainy and gloomy, but up in the north, in my hometown, or home village rather, Inari, we already have snow, and it's starting to be really lovely and cold, because that is what we like, and a lot of our culture is based on winter and the cold terrain that is the Arctic. So maybe, despite the introduction, I'll start a little bit by telling about myself. But then I really tried to use my own story to explain certain themes that are really important to me. So I will speak a lot about what it is to be an indigenous person belonging to an indigenous people, and some of the challenges that we are facing in terms of self-determination, our rights, and also in terms of, for example, huge challenges like the climate change and loss of biodiversity. I'll also tell about my path in the corporate world and in the business world. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to combine, working in kind of the Western world, but at the same time making sure that I'm somehow contributing to my own culture and making sure that we're trying to preserve and develop the Sami languages and the culture to the next generations. And of course, that's not without conflict. So I'll also share some of my thinking and some of the things that you have to sometimes consider and think about, because there are, of course, clashes between kind of the Western way of thinking and the indigenous way of thinking. And sometimes you have to face those. And then towards the end, of course, we'll leave some time for questions, but I'll also make sure that I'll share information about our culture and so on. I also have some tips about some cultural products like poems and music and so on. Remind me if I don't remember to go into those, but because there have even been Sami poems and Sami poetry translated into Spanish, and it has been published in Colombia. So I want to share that with you towards the end. But maybe again, so my name is Pirita Näkkelejärvi, and where should I start? Well, maybe what is the most important to me? I am Sami, so I belong to the indigenous people Sami, and I was born into a family where we come from families who are reindeer herders, so we own reindeer and have done so for many years, many decades, and a long time over a long period of time. But also, I'm from a family where my father started a business. So maybe because of that and being from an entrepreneurial family, I also became interested in business and studying that. I speak Sami language as my mother tongue. And I am not sure whether you know, but there are actually 9 different Sami languages, not just one, but 9. I speak the biggest one, which is Northern Sami. And the languages are spread throughout our area, sámi, which is an area where we have lived always, which is part of the Arctic. We are an Arctic indigenous people, but our area, Sápmi, Samiland, has been divided into 4 pieces by the nation states and the borders of the nation states. So nowadays we live in 4 countries where we are one people divided into 4 countries. So we are in Finland, where I live. We also in Sweden, in Norway, and also on the Russian side. For example, my language group, Northern Sami, goes across the borders, and that really illustrates our life, that we have a lot of relatives across the borders. I have a lot of relatives on the Norwegian side, and we don't think that it's a different, different area or different kind of country. Well, we don't care so much about the borders because we view that it's Sami land, and we try to make sure that we work across the borders and don't let the borders divide us and make it difficult to work together. Of course, for example, during the Corona times, the COVID-19 pandemic, the national borders have been closed, and you can tell immediately that it's been, or there have been a lot of negative effects on our culture. And it's been more difficult to be in touch with our relatives and friends across the borders. It's been difficult to organize cultural events. You were not able to go on the Norwegian side or on the Swedish side to work on all sorts of cultural things and so on. So we've really felt the borders now, that they really do exist, because otherwise we don't really care about them so much. And maybe I'll also tell about what I'm wearing today. So I'm wearing my Sami dress. In our language, it's called kakti. And from my dress, you can actually tell from which area I am from. You can also tell all sorts of other things, because this dress it's not just clothing. It carries a lot of meanings and a lot of messages. So it's almost like communication. And it's really a bit hard to see at the moment, but I'll try to show a little bit. So from the ornaments in my dress, you can tell that I come from a family that comes from the Enontakia, Kautokeino region. So it's typical for us to put a lot of ornaments and a lot of color and silver and so on. And also from the hat, you can tell that. And then I'll try to show you a little bit. So from my belt, I'm wearing round silver buttons. So you can tell that I am not married. If I was married, I would have square buttons. So another little clue. And then some other messages that I'm carrying. So the silver that I have here, we call this risku or solju. And this was made a couple of years to commemorate. We had a huge, a very important year because it was 100 years since the first Nordic gathering of the Sami people for a political gathering. And this brooch was made to commemorate that gathering. And it actually happened to be the same year when Finland also celebrated its 100th year of independence. But for us, the celebration was that also we Sami people started working together and getting organized politically about 100 years ago. And this brooch really symbolizes the 4 countries that we have been divided in and the different directions where we live. And it also has our traditional colors. So our traditional colors that we also have in our flag are blue, red, yellow, and green. So we like a lot of bright colors, and you can see that also in our clothing. And then from what I am wearing, you can also, if you're really knowledgeable in Sami culture, you can and read things like, okay, maybe you can catch a clue of where I am going to or what is the context. So if I was going to like a wedding or some big celebration or so on, I would have bigger brooches. So these are kind of my, or like everyday, what I would wear when it's not a huge celebration. And also if I was going to a funeral, I wouldn't be wearing so colorful. So we would tone it down. We would wear an older version of the dress, like a black shawl or at least dark blue or so, and hardly any brooches, like a really, really small brooch and no earrings and so on. But, you can tell that it's a happy occasion. I'm wearing a lot of colors and also a lot of jewelry. And then at the moment, what is really fashionable? So there are fashion trends also in the Sami culture. So what we like at the moment, and everybody wants to get some, are earrings or brooches made out of reindeer horn. And these are really nice and light to wear. And also some people have started using only brooches made out of horn because they want to kind of send a statement also kind of against metals and mining and so on. But so far I have stuck to my silver. I'm also wearing some rings, and we like these all sorts of things that are hanging and these little leaves that are reflecting light, and these things that are in the rings that make nice noises. For example, if I'm writing on my computer, these make noise. And some of the things that we believe is that these noises keep the bad spirits away. So there's all sorts of symbolism in our clothes. And then next to me is a purse that I got from my friends a couple of years ago, and it has the same kind of ornaments that my dress has, but this is a bit more modern version. So we also have these nice Sami design items nowadays. And whereas our dress is something that we only wear and it's not for outsiders to wear, because it's really, our dress is an extension of our identity and our name, and it covers so many hidden messages. But these new design items that many Sami handicraft persons are developing, anyone can buy them and enjoy them, and we really feel it and see it as a sign of respect if people want to carry some of these design items or so on. And then I also took this. This is actually something that you can wear around your neck as a jewelry, but it's a little bag made out of reindeer skin. And you could actually use this and put some salt, for example, here. And we have bigger versions for coffee, for example, and for sugar if you're going up in the fells. Really handy. But these can also, you can wear them as jewelry. So I thought I'll show you that. Okay, it's not standing right, but anyway, you'll see it there. Okay, but as said, I am at the moment in Helsinki, so far away from my home village. So my home village is 330 kilometers above the Arctic Circle. If you look it up in the map, Inari, so Inari. But I'm at the moment in Helsinki, and the reason why I am here is that my job is here. So I have 2 degrees. I have studied business and I have studied media and communications. And at the moment, I am continuing in my business career. So I'm working as a consultant at EY Parthenon. And what I do is a lot of mergers and acquisitions. And it might sound really strange, like, okay, what is this indigenous Sami girl? How do these 2 worlds combine? But I would argue that I'm actually a fairly typical case of a modern Sami person, especially the younger generation. Also, our parents' generations have been more and more educated. So it's quite common for the Sami, even though we would have been born up in the north, to come and study, for example, in Helsinki or some of the cities. And get degrees, and we have a lot of people in different professions, like we have doctors and engineers and teachers and business people and researchers and musicians and whatever, you name it. Of course, some people also want to continue in the traditional livelihoods, but it's also a fact that not everybody can become a reindeer herder or a fisher or a Sami handicraft person. So we are spread in different vocations. And what is also fairly typical is that we try to combine the traditional and the modern. So I'm just one of the many, many Sami people, and it's the same in all of the countries where we live, is that even though we educate ourselves and we might have very successful careers in companies and wherever, we want to make sure that we are involved in the Sami community and in the Sami culture. And at the moment, I am active politically and culturally. But then some people spend maybe time in their families' livelihoods, like helping with reindeer herding or fishing or doing Sami handicraft, or some people are writing poems, they're translating books, they work as journalists, or they in their spare time do some voluntary work and teach kids or so on. So there are many ways of combining the modern and the traditional. And that is something that is really important to us. And I think it kind of distinguishes us from the Nordic peoples. So, for example, from the Finnish people who we live together here in this land called Finland nowadays, is that for us, traditions are really, really central to our culture. So we feel a lot of, you would say, almost like obligation, and sometimes it even feels as quite hard pressure on your shoulders and something to carry, but you try to make sure that the traditions don't die, but they are transferred to the next generations and stay alive, whether it's the languages that we have or the culture. But for us, when you say tradition, it doesn't mean something that has been put in museum, but it's something that is kept alive and changes a little bit to adapt to the world, but doesn't kind of lose the connection to the past and to the heritage. And on the other hand, for us, it's really important that the traditions continue, and there is a link to our foremothers and forefathers and to the previous generations. But also, we realize that to stay alive and to be able to preserve and develop, you have to change. So it's also kind of a constant conflict of how do you preserve the old and keep the connection to the old and to the past, and then make sure that we are moving forward. And maybe in our clothes, you can also read some of that. So, for example, my dress, I don't know if you can see, it's made out of this shiny material. So in the old days, they would wear these dresses every day and they would be not as colorful and not as decorated. And also they would be made out of wool because they were obviously used outdoors while working with reindeer or fishing or whatever. But nowadays we wear these dresses and these clothes mostly when there is a celebration or some kind of a formal occasion. And also, as I said, we do have fashions with these clothes. So that also reflects kind of the attitude towards the modern life, that we keep our traditions, but we kind of adapt them to the world around us. And needless to say, for example, if you're indoors, for example, speaking to you guys, I would be feeling quite hot if I was wearing a big woolen, really thick dress. So, of course, it's a practical thing as well. And maybe then I could tell a little bit about my work and how I got here and what I've been doing. So, although Sami culture is really important to me, I have been also very ambitious in terms of my career. And when I decided that I want to study business, I wanted to, explore the business world and experience it in, how would I say it? Get the most out of it because I've been studying business. So what I've been doing, I've always tried to get into world-leading companies and really interesting positions where you can do all sorts of interesting, exciting stuff. And what most important, work with really smart people. It's usually a good idea to work with people who are smarter than you because you can learn so much from them. So when I graduated from the Helsinki School of Economics, I was lucky to get my first job with Merrill Lynch in London. So I was an investment banker for a while. But then that was during the heyday of Nokia. You might have, I don't know if you are too young to remember that, but some of you might remember a Finnish mobile phone company called Nokia. It still exists, but it's mostly nowadays with the networks and so on. But in those days, Nokia was the biggest mobile phone manufacturer in the world. And I was so happy when I was able to join the company. I was doing mergers and acquisitions there for a while. And those were amazing times. We were traveling around the world, buying smaller and bigger companies, for example, in Germany or in the US, also looking at companies in Asia and so on, and really working in this amazingly global and international environment. After that, I've been working, I've continued to be kind of working along the mergers and acquisitions life cycle or value chain. But then I switched more to the strategy side. So I've been working with strategy in different roles. So as a consultant and also as a deal advisor in industrial companies in an in-house role and so on. And what I've been trying to do, I've been trying to kind of grow my expertise around mergers and acquisitions and strategy and so on. And most recently, before joining EY or EY Parthenon team, I was with Helen, which is one of the biggest or largest energy companies in Finland. So getting some experience from the energy side. And now I'm focused again on mergers and acquisitions, but now kind of the very end of the cycle. So what happens when a company buys another company? You need to integrate them and kind of, again, adapt them together. So that's what I'm specialized in. Or if a company decides to sell part of their operations to another company, then our team is there to help to carve out that part of the business and sell it to another company. So that's what I do. And I just started at EY Parthenon. So that's why I'm also in Helsinki now, because I'm learning the ropes and getting into the company and being onboarded and so on. But it's interesting that in this post-pandemic world, well, it's not over yet, but anyway, we are gradually moving to a bit more normal state of things. So we actually work in a hybrid model, which enables us really work anywhere we want to, and really organize our day the way we want to organize, which is really great for me because it makes it easier for me to combine, of course, my daily work stuff, my business stuff, but then I can take every now and then, if I need an hour to go to a meeting with my political stuff or do something like that, then I can do that really flexibly. So in a way, this new hybrid model that is developing after the COVID-19 pandemic is helping me to live the kind of life that I want to live. So I really want to continue to develop my career, and I want to get better in my job, and I of course want to kind of climb the corporate ladder, but I also want to make sure that I have time to do the things that are also important to me in my heart. One thing that I didn't elaborate on yet, we mentioned it a couple of times, but I'm at the moment an elected member of the Sami parliament. And what is that, you might ask? So here in the Nordic countries, in Finland, Norway, and Sweden, we have organizations called the Sami Parliament in each of the three countries. And what it is the official representative of the Sami people in that country. And we have an election every 4 years. We had an election just over, 2 years ago. And I was very happy to be elected as one of the 21 members in the Sami parliament. Well, it sounds very grand to say Sami parliament because we're not really like the parliament in Finland, which has all the power to, make legislation and build new laws and decide about all of these kind of legislative matters. So, okay, we are the official voice of the Sami people in Finland, and we have that right to give the official statements on behalf of the Sami people, but we don't have any power over laws or use of land up in the north or any decisions about the funding of our languages and so on. So it's fairly symbolic power that we have. Nevertheless, it's really important that indigenous peoples have some kind of an official voice, an official representative in the society. Because when you think about it, Finland is a large country and a long country. So, and part of Finland has been built on the Sami land. So it's only natural that within the Finnish government system, you have some kind of a structure that takes into account the Sami people. And that's what the Sami parliament is. So whenever there are some issues, for example, plans to build something on the Sami land or do some logging on the so-called state-owned lands or something that has a big impact on our culture, we have a right to go and negotiate with the government. Then it's a different thing whether the government listens to us, because they don't have an obligation to actually, make a decision based on what we say. But nevertheless, we can go and say our thing, we can hand out a statement or so on. And that's really important because otherwise it wouldn't really be democracy. And this is a way to make sure that a minority and an indigenous people like us is part of the decision making. And so I'm just an ordinary member of the Sami parliament, but the headquarters is in Inari, in my home village. And we do gather there a couple of times a year, so 4 or 5 times a year. We don't have money for anymore because it's expensive to travel. Everybody comes from different areas of Finland, and then we come together, and you have translators there because everything is in 3 Sami languages and in Finnish, and you have our administration and so on. So it's expensive to have the meetings. But anyway, we are able to have those meetings, and we have a really nice cultural center in Inari, which is our parliament house, and it's also our cultural center, and that's where we have the meetings. We have 3 politicians who are working either full-time or part-time in their positions, so we're lucky to have at least one our president, who is a full-time politician and is able to work on these issues all the time. And then we have an executive board, which has meetings more regularly. But because of my job, I didn't seek to be part of the executive board because I think that would be too much to commit to so many meetings. And I can't take, for example, if I'm in a busy client project and then there's an executive board meeting that is the whole day, that doesn't work. But I can be part in something that doesn't require such a huge time commitment. So, for example, I'm the chair of the cultural committee. So we have some grants that we can give out to Sami artists or Sami associations and so on. So I'm in that committee and we give out the money once a year. It's not a huge amount of money. It's about 170,000 euros per year. But anyway, it's something that keeps the cultural scene alive. And I'm really honored that I can be in that position because that is a really concrete way, of course, of helping Sami artists and associations and cultural workers to do the amazing work that they do. Then I've been also part of a drafting commission, and we've been working on an amendment of the Sami Parliament law. So for the past year, we had meetings every now and then, and we've gone through the old law or the legislation, and we've kind of identified what are the weaknesses, what needs to be strengthened. And you may ask why? Why do you need to make such an amendment? So this is a law that governs how the Sami Parliament works and how the relations between the Finnish state and the Sami work and how all of that works. And the law is quite old. It's from 95. Since that time, the indigenous rights have developed a lot. And you might have heard about this because, of course, there are many indigenous peoples in your part of the world. So there have been huge developments in terms of self-determination and the rights of indigenous peoples. And the way that the thinking at the moment in international law is that indigenous peoples are equal peoples to those peoples or nations who have their nation states. So, for example, here we have the nation states of Finland, Norway, Sweden, Russia. But then we have these people, Sami, who live in this area as well, have a long connection to the land. Our livelihoods, their traditional livelihoods, are reindeer herding, fishing, handicraft, hunting, gathering. It all depends on the land. And that really makes us indigenous. We also have our languages and so on. So nowadays the thinking is that although we don't have our own state, obviously we don't have our own country, but still we should be treated as a people as well, with people's rights, such as self-determination, so being able to decide over our destiny. But the legislation, the law is really dragging behind and it's really old-fashioned. It's not working really well. So what we've been trying to do is we've been negotiating in the drafting commission. So there were 5 of us who were selected there from the Sami Parliament. And then there were 5 members from the Finnish government parties. And we made a huge piece of, like a proposal on the new law. It's 180 pages long, so I hope somebody has had time to read it. But that was an amazing experience to be actually part of the group that was thinking how the new law should be. And we're at the moment now in the stages where the government is negotiating among themselves whether they can accept our proposal. And if that happens, fingers crossed, then it will go to the Finnish Parliament. So again, you might see a bit of a strange thing here. So why should the Finnish Parliament decide about a law about the Sami people and the Sami Parliament? Well, that's how the world works, unfortunately. So we of course live here in the nation states. We have no wish to have our own country or our own state. So we negotiate with the nation states, and we really hope that we can make this amendment because it would make the rights of the Sami people in Finland much better. So wish us luck. Then I want to mention, before we run out of time and start taking the questions, a couple of things. So I mentioned climate change and also loss of biodiversity, but especially climate change is a huge challenge for us. The Arctic is our home. So up in the north, the land of snow and ice, that is our home. And that is unfortunately also the area where the impact and the effects of the climate change can be felt the most at the moment. The Arctic area is warming many times quicker than the average in the world. And we see it with our own eyes that the environment and the climate are really changing. And we see it especially in our winters. Our winters are shorter. They are also more unstable and unpredictable. So whereas before we could rely on our traditional knowledge that we know when it usually snows and we know kind of what snow will fall and how that works and when it gets colder and when the lakes are going to freeze over and so on. But nowadays it's really random. You might have snowfall and then it suddenly melts and then it gets really cold and then you have the whole land frozen. It's hard for the reindeer to find food. And then you suddenly have tons of snow. So you have ice beneath, and then you might have like 2 meters of snow. We had that a couple of years ago, and that was a disaster for our reindeer. A lot of reindeer died during that year. Overall, so it's really hard to, try and adapt to all of these changes because they are so unpredictable. And I'm sure that you also know from your own environment changes that are probably caused by the climate change and how unpredictable the world and the climate and the environment has become. And of course, for us, that is a really difficult thing because our livelihoods depend so much on the nature and on the surrounding environment. And if we're going to lose our winters, then our culture is going to change a lot. The living environment for the reindeer, for example, is going to change a lot, and we have to make huge adaptations, and also, of course, the surrounding environment for our animals and for our livelihoods is going to change a lot. So what we're trying to offer as a remedy is that because well, I'm not there, but I mean, many of my relatives and many of some people who work with the traditional livelihoods, they are really there in the fells and in the forest, at the lakes, at the rivers every day. And they really witness it firsthand, what is happening. They have a lot of observations about the nature and the changes and so on. So instead of, well, not instead, but in addition to sending scientists to find out what is happening with the climate and with the nature, we think that the scientists and governments and the decision makers should really make use of the first-hand information that we have about nature and what is happening out there. And that is something that we can hope to help with so that the whole world can adapt better to climate change and to the changes ahead. And then finally, I wanted to mention a couple of things about our arts. So as mentioned, a friend of mine, Inger-Mari Aikio, Ima, she's a Sami poet. She's also a journalist and a filmmaker, but nowadays she's mostly a poet. And she has written over the years and decades many amazing poetry books. And one of her books has been, actually many of her books, but especially the latest one, I think, has been translated to Spanish. And has been published in Colombia. It's called 69 Pillars. And it is actually erotic poetry. So it's quite a new thing that you write poetry about erotic topics and so on in Sami. So it's quite revolutionary as well. But anyway, it's also good poetry. So if you want to look it up, I recommend that. 69 Pillars by Inger-Mari Aikio. And I think some of her other work has been also translated not only to Spanish, but to many other languages as well. And I think you can find her poetry on YouTube if you'd like to see some of that. I think even in Spanish, if I'm not mistaken. And of all the different art forms that Sami people produce, my favorite is music. And especially Sami music that is based on our traditional vocal music, which is called yoik. It also takes other names and different forms because we have different languages and different cultural groups. But the one that belongs to my people, to the Fell Sami or Reindeer Sami or North Sami, however you want to call us, it's called yoik. And there are really amazing bands nowadays combining our very traditional vocal music that has origins hundreds, if not thousands, years ago, combining that with modern instruments and modern styles and pop and electronic music and so on. And perhaps one album that I could, or maybe a couple of albums I could recommend to you. One is a really nice band called Solju. So the same as this brooch, the name of the brooch, Solju. So they make this kind of world music type of music, combining with yoik. So there's a daughter and a mother who are yoiking in two generations, and you can also kind of compare. So the mom, who's in her 50s maybe, has a bit more traditional style than the daughter who's in her 20s. And then that is set on top of this kind of really interesting and rhythmical world music. So look it up, Solju. And you can find their music on YouTube and in the typical streaming services. And then something that I'm really proud of, my best friends and my cousins band, Anna-Maret Ensemble. And she's actually making music inspired yoiks from our family. And that's really amazing. She's been studying archival yoiks, so yoiks that have been recorded over 50 years ago, and some of them later. But anyway, she's studying the yoiks that come from our family because that is the way the tradition works, that the yoiks would be made for example, people. So everybody would have their own yoik, or you could yoik the reindeer, for example, or certain type of bird or a wolf or even a puppy or whatever. And nowadays, the yoikers even can yoik, I don't know, a train or so on. And you might wonder, like, why am I saying this? We are yoiking something. That is the way we think. It's not about something, but you are yoiking that thing, that person. And a couple of weeks ago, I actually received a yoik. So my best friend made a yoik for me and yoiked me. So that's pretty amazing because for a long time in our family, the tradition hasn't been kept alive because of colonialism and impact of the church, and somehow we were told by the church and by the religion that it is a sin to yoik. So that disappeared a bit or went to the background somehow, maybe. But now we're trying to revitalize that tradition. And I'm so honored to now receive a new yoik that is for me. So she also makes music where she combines electronic music and vocal tradition that is inspired by our yoiks and our traditional vocal music. So look it up, Anna-Maret Ensemble. And I can provide these names and perhaps some links also afterwards. So perhaps some of those tips, and I wasn't able to play you any music now, but at least I was able to show one face and one kind of glimpse of our culture. And I'm so much looking forward to hearing some of your questions and discussing whatever comes to your mind. So thank you.
Pirita, thank you very, very much for everything that you told us. It's so interesting, so different from what we know here in Colombia, from the indigenous tribes that we know here, how different it is. to think of that in the north, and it's so interesting. So thank you for sharing so many things with us. um, we're so glad that you're here telling us that. Over here on YouTube, Natalia says, very interesting talk, Pirita. Thank you for sharing all that information with us here in Colombia. I feel the same way. I think everyone else feels the same way. And Karen sends you claps. And over Instagram, sorry, over Facebook, there is one question, and it says, what do Samis believe? Are they polytheistic? Do you believe in the Nordic mythology?
That is a great question, because we didn't talk about colonialism so much. So, what has happened over the last 500 years or so, at least, is that we have been very violently being taken away our old way of religion and our old nature-based religion. So, in the old days, we had our own gods, and we had a lot of mythology and our own worldview that was very much in connection with the nature and the land. But when the colonizers, the settlers, and especially the church came into our area, what they have, of course, been doing to a lot of indigenous peoples, they also did to us. So they took our drums. We used to have these amazing drums that were almost like well, they were these really nice wooden pieces of handicraft with reindeer skin on top, and then like characters that had been drawn on the drums depicting not only our gods but also our worldview and a lot of things in the nature and the different parts of our world that we believed in. And also in some of the newer drums, and most of the drums, by the way, are whether if they were not burned back in the day, they were taken to many museums. So, for example, in the British Museum, they have two of our drums. We don't own any of our drums anymore. They've been taken there. But in some of the newer drums, you can see also a bit more modern things. So on those drums, what has been drawn there, you would also see churches. So you could again see what I was talking about, how the culture is evolving. But unfortunately, what happened was that most of our drums were taken away from us. Some of the Noiti, or the shamans, who used to be like the healers and those who operate the drums and were the spiritual leaders, they were killed, violently murdered for having the drums and having that knowledge. And also, I think it was fear, because they were really powerful leaders. And when you take away the religion, in our case, the drums, you also, what you caused was, a loss of all of that knowledge and that old way of thinking that we had. But I would say that not everything has been lost. So nowadays, most of us are Christians. Some are very, very religious, others are not, but many belong to the Lutheran Church. But still, there is a lot of that old thinking, and especially the respect to the nature. So the one of the ways of thinking is always to think like many, many generations, like the next generations, so that you make sure that you're not taking more from the land than you need, because you have to think about your children and their children and all of the generations to come. So you can't destroy things. So I think that's kind of a reflection of the relationship with the land and the whole kind of worldview around that thinking. And some of the fragments had been preserved, but unfortunately the drums are locked away in many of those museums. But hopefully someday we'll get them back, and we can start also learning more about them.
Of course, so interesting. And you also mentioned all the poems of these artists, and it's not here on the it's not on the comments, but some were asking what is the name of the artist that whose poems you wanted to you just shared, because they couldn't write them down. Do you have them
Okay.
so that we can?
So I'll provide you, because just a little
Yes,
secret. So we have this internal chat here. So I'll provide the names here. Maybe you can share. So this
and we'll
one,
put it on the screen. Yes.
yeah. So the first one is Solio. That's the band, the world music type of music.
Okay.
And then my best friend and my cousin, her band goes by the name Anna Ensemble. And by the way, when we were kids, when we were teenagers, we used to make music together. So I always dreamt of being a musician. So I'm a failed musician who became a boring business person, but she's continuing what we did as kids. And that's also why I'm so, so proud. And also, I was so happy to receive a yoik as a gift from her. So I hope one day she will make a record and put my yoik there. I would be so proud.
How do you spell yoik? Um,
In English, you spell it Yoik. And hey, then the poet that I mentioned, so that's Inger Mari Aikio, or Inga for short. So those are my first tips, but then you can find a lot of other stuff online, and also if there's something specific you're interested in, I can always give more tips.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So we put them on the comments. No, we didn't put them here on the screen, but we put it on the comments on YouTube and on Facebook, so that everyone can write them down. And there's another question that is not here, neither in the either here on the. I think it's not on Facebook, but they were asking if you wear your outfit every day, or if you just wear it for special occasions.
I wear it mostly for special occasions,
Yeah.
although, mind you, things like this, speaking to students or speaking to politicians or whatever, I do it quite a lot. And I also have quite a lot of political gatherings and so on. So I tend to wear my dress maybe twice a month at least. But of course, in the old days, in my grandma's time, for example, my grandmother always wore the dress, and my other grandmother, who is still alive, she wears the dress every day, more or less. But nowadays, it's mostly for the festivals and the celebrations and so on. There have been, though, some interesting kind of almost like artistic projects where people have thought and wanted to experiment what it feels like to wear the dress every day. But that requires that you make a little bit less decorated, and you have a simpler scarf and not so big brooches and so on. So you have to kind of adapt it back again to the everyday use, because this has been developed like for the festivities, and that's why you tend to put more and more decorations and brighter colors and more bling and bigger earrings and so on. But now we're kind of developing how the everyday Sami dress could be, and I'd like to try that at some point. Unfortunately, I don't know how to make these. I'd like to learn so I could make my everyday Sami dress, and perhaps even wear maybe once a week, go to work in a Sami dress.
Of course, it's you. It's you. So that would be incredible. Pirita, thank you very, very much for your time, for sharing everything that you just shared with us. We're very glad to have had you here, that you had accepted our invitation. Thank you, everyone, for being over on the other side watching you. I'm going to switch to Spanish super quick. Solamente les voy a decir que nos quedan 2 eventos esta tarde, que son Cocina con Ignacio Cajiao y nuestro cierre con el doctor Álvaro Ruiz. Inscríbanse para que puedan llegar a los eventos 5 y 6 de la tarde. Esperamos que se gocen el cierre de la Semana Internacional. Estamos muy contentos porque ha sido una semana impresionante y nos encanta tenerlos del otro lado. Again, Pirita, thank you very much for your time, and we're so glad to have had you.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. Really nice to meet all of you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.